I need to stop. I'm such a fidgeter. So I'm not allowed to say now. You're not allowed to say all right or that's awesome.
I mean, I started with, all right, welcome back.
Yeah. So this time you just have to say, and welcome back.
And welcome back.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I say now or if I touch my hair, just hit me. Get a water gun. Yeah. All right.
You good?
Yeah. I hate starting it.
And welcome back to Our Herd, the Toledo Zoo's official podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Corey.
I'm Caitlin.
And we're both back here after an excellent episode that we had last time. We weren't even in this studio space. We were out on grounds, outside, in the heat, with some of our animal friends. What a fun time that was.
It was awesome. And if you guys have not seen or watched that episode yet, I definitely recommend. Our guests were real slobbery, real stinky, but it was awesome.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we all had to go home and take like a nice shower after that one because they were slobber in everybody's hair.
There's slobber stains on my shirt. I'm not even kidding you. I was
you
like,
just can't
Ty
get that
did
out.
not get that out. So,
thanks a lot, Charlotte Michelle, the giraffe.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I hope we get to do stuff like that in the future. So definitely be on the lookout for future episodes because you never know what we're going to get into.
Yep. And if you're wondering how you can watch that episode, we host this podcast on 3 different platforms, one of which is a video podcast, and that's YouTube. So you can watch it on YouTube or you can listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We're back here for another great episode. We're so excited to talk to our guests here today because we're in the full heat of summer and the stuff that they work with is thriving during this time of year.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a great topic for us, especially for those who are living in the Northwest Ohio region. But there's a lot of great lessons to be learned for those who live across the entire globe, honestly.
And on top of it being extremely hot this summer, we are doing so many things at the zoo to help celebrate our 125th anniversary. And that includes just highlighting our different initiatives that go along with our mission. So our mission is enjoy, inspire, educate, and act. And today we are going to be highlighting our act portion, specifically with our Wild Toledo program, which is a conservation agency in the Northwest region here in Toledo.
Yeah, it's incredible that the Toledo Zoo in of itself is able to branch out and kind of live out in different forms. And this Wild Toledo initiative and organization, the amount of incredible work that they're doing is just so exciting to dive into. I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah. So without further ado, let's introduce some of the faces of Wild Toledo. We have Jake and Elizabeth here to talk to us today. Thanks for being here, you guys.
Thanks so much for having us.
Kind of give us a little bit of background as to who you are and how it is that you came to be sitting in this spot with us today.
Forcefully. I'm kidding.
What type of adventures and journeys have you been on to put yourselves in this seat here today? Jake, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I'm Jake Schoen, the Wild Toledo coordinator here at the zoo. I actually was a volunteer. My first foray into the zoo world was in high school, volunteering in the reptile house, actually. And then went on to get a undergraduate degree at Ohio University. And while that was concluding, I was looking for jobs in the field. And funny enough, the state herpetologist directed me right back to Toledo, actually right back to Kent Becker, who I volunteered under, who is now at that time heading the conservation department. So it was kind of funny to find myself back here. Working again with Wild Toledo, kind of in its infancy and its second or third year at the time. And, from that point on, I've been working with Wild Toledo at the zoo going on almost 10 years now. I did get my master's degree at Bowling Green during that time and a zoo-supported project as well, which was really, really exciting.
I feel like that's very common for people in this field. They want to do something else. Like we've noticed with our keepers, they'll be like, I wanted to work with dolphins and now they're working with elephants. Or like our reptile keepers were like, I want to work with big cats and now they're working with lizards.
The complete opposite.
So for you, you're like, I want to work with reptiles and now you're working with plants.
Yeah, I always appreciated plants, but I was definitely more animal centric in most of my interests, especially growing up. But you can't have any of the animals if you don't have the plants as kind of the base of the food chain. So I've actually found that working with plants is a great way to get a very widespread experience with animals and supporting them kind of from the ground up. So I still get my animal fix kind of at the same time, which is great.
You're out there just finding snakes and lizards while you're planting stuff.
Yeah, never a dull moment. We
did last week. We caught a couple snakes at a landscape.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah. So Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about how you got to this point, how it is that you're sitting here with us today.
Yeah, my background's a little different than Jake's. And I was living on the East Coast and got an undergraduate degree from Towson University outside of Baltimore, Maryland. But came back to my hometown of Toledo. I'm very happy to be here. I initially worked in a lot of outdoor and environmental education groups for a number of park systems, but found after a few years of that I wanted to get more hands-on. So I went back to working in hands-on conservation at a couple different conservation agencies in Northwest Ohio, and saw the opening for a native landscape designer. And I thought that would be a great way to take my skills as a habitat manager and bring it to more people, have it widely available in their front and backyards, and still create those benefits to our pollinators, insects, and throughout the food web. So I've been here now 3 years, and I'm really enjoying the challenge that is every day at Wild Toledo.
Did either of you imagine doing the jobs that you're doing today when you were younger and getting into school?
No. I mean, this job didn't exist until quite recently. A native landscape designer, wasn't a thing. It still isn't a thing throughout a lot of the country, but to be able to do that and at a zoo-supported native landscape designer, I think is quite a unique opportunity, and I'm excited to be here doing it.
That's awesome that you're one of the first people to be doing this.
It's true.
Yeah.
You're laying the groundwork for the future.
Yeah, we don't know of any other zoo-supportive native landscape programs that I'm aware of.
It's truly unique. And that's why we're so excited to have you guys here today to talk about it, because there's many that haven't heard of it. But what I've noticed over the years is as soon as somebody hears about it, they're like, wait, I need to know more about this. And how can I get involved? Jake, what about you? Did you always see yourself as being a native plant connoisseur and all around expert?
Working at a zoo definitely wouldn't have surprised me, to learn that as a kid. But being in the kind of plant realm of things would have been a bit of a surprise to the younger version of myself. And in terms of the kind of job description that I have, I never could have imagined it. Even during college, really never would have thought that I'd be in the position that I am today, but it's been incredibly rewarding and, great working with our amazing team. No 2 days are alike. And it's, really satisfying to be a part of kind of that groundwork for supporting, the entire ecosystem, essentially from the bottom of the food chain upwards.
And I think that's one big important thing for us to really lay the groundwork for before we get too far into things is let's talk about essentially in its most basic form, what is Wild Toledo and what is the purpose of Wild Toledo?
So Wild Toledo is a subset of our conservation department here at the zoo. And the zoo prides ourselves on being involved both in global projects and exotic places with, many species across the globe. But in addition to that, we also pride ourselves on focusing right here in our own backyards of Toledo. You mentioned our mission statement, and the last part of that is of course ACT. And there's fewer things that a Toledoan can do. Our average zoo guest, of course, is a Toledoan, and there's fewer things that they can do to directly act and affect positive conservation change to distant parts of the globe. But it's very easy for a Toledoan to make minor changes in their day-to-day life that can have a tremendous impact on our local ecosystem. A lot of people think, conservation occurs in these far off exotic places, and that's certainly true, but we still have a wide number of imperiled species right here in our own backyards that are in equal need of attention and conservation. And it's kind of neat to be able to address that and support it directly, even at home in your own backyard, rather than strictly in faraway places.
Yeah, for people who live in the Midwest and specifically Northwest Ohio, Southern Michigan, I grew up here too. And even working at the zoo, when I first started, I didn't think of my home region as being a very biodiverse and valuable area when it comes to wildlife, but that's quite honestly so far from the truth. There's so much biodiversity in this region. You get all kinds of different landscapes. And like, I mean, this is just one example, but for instance, there are hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of migratory birds that come through this area. And it's such a vital resource for even species like birds that don't necessarily live here year long, but they depend on it so much to be able to do their every year migrations, and insects and all kinds of like very specific species that live in just this region. It's so cool.
Yeah, Ohio isn't just cornfields.
It's not just cornfields.
Like growing up, you're like, ugh.
It might be
Ohio.
flat, but it's not just
We're
cornfields.
real flat, but
We got muddy swamps that turtles love to chill out in, and water snakes that just also chilling.
Plants that are chilling.
Plants that are
It's
chilling.
mostly chilling.
Everybody's just
mostly
really
chilling.
everybody's just really chill around here, but we need to keep it that way, right?
Yeah, we need to keep it chill. Keep the ecosystem chill.
So how is it that Wild Toledo started in the first place? And from what I've learned is that we kind of stumbled into this, right?
Wild Toledo began with our Urban Prairie initiative, where we would convert underutilized or entirely unutilized turfgrass areas on the zoo campus and also on public properties around the city. We would convert them from turfgrass, which is essentially about as useful as a parking lot as far as most wildlife is concerned.
Useless.
It truly is. Sure, it's green, but it requires a lot of resources to maintain. It often requires additional watering, and wildlife is not supported by turf grass. Typically, we actually do quite a bit of biodiversity surveying around our prairies, but also adjacent sites that are turf grass, and looking at the difference in the biodiversity and the abundance of wildlife in a turf grass area versus a native planting is astounding. And so we would go in and convert these turf areas into native prairies. And this was incredibly popular, both here at the zoo, but around the city, at schools, businesses, you name it. And so we've kind of began with prairie restoration projects around Toledo. And part of that involved us starting a native plant nursery here at the zoo to grow potted plants that are kind of head started to be planted into the prairies, which are also typically started from seed. And that kind of just jump starts things, gets flowers blooming a little quicker than normal. And once we had the nursery up and running to support the Prairie initiative, we really noticed the demand from the public for these potted, like garden center type plants. It can be fairly difficult to source native plants material locally and really everywhere. Sometimes there are, some of the larger nurseries will sell natives, but they may be a cultivated form, or they might call something native if it's native to the United States as a whole, but not necessarily native to Ohio or this part of Ohio. And it can be kind of difficult to navigate. And so with that demand and interest from the public for potted plants, we opened up our kind of second wing of the program, being our retail plant nursery. And then, that really addresses kind of the do-it-yourself crowd, people who are trying to add plants into an existing garden that they may have to bring those benefits that native plants provide. However, not everyone is necessarily interested or up for kind of doing it all themselves, and it can be a bit daunting to take that on. And so we started our third and most recent initiative, which is our native landscaping wing, which can design, install, and maintain, and kind of take the guesswork out of it. And that way, we can reach the widest possible audience, allow the widest amount of people to act locally and support conservation, whether, it's with a prairie on a large parcel or a do-it-yourself, garden kit that a homeowner is adding into an existing landscape, or someone, say, with a small front yard in an HOA that needs to look really tidy and formal, but they still want to support local wildlife. Whether or not they have the experience to do it themselves, they can work with Wild Toledo to make that happen.
I want to like clear up. I don't know if it's like a misconception or like for me, this was something that needed to be cleared up a little bit. When we talk about native plants, I didn't quite know what that meant. Because for me, it was, well, if I just let my yard go and just grow whatever, you see like weeds. I want to clarify that native plants aren't weeds and they don't look like weeds. Native plants have a lot of beauty that they can offer. So kind of talk to me about what different types of shapes and colors and beauty that native plants can offer in this region.
Native plants come in a wide variety in Northwest Ohio. And there are a variety that are very suitable for like a native landscaping, a formal native landscaping. And there are some that are going to be very aggressive and not as aesthetically pleasing that are not as suitable, but they still provide the same benefits to pollinators and the ecosystem benefits. So for myself, I tend to choose for landscapes, very well-behaved natives. Oftentimes these are plants you might know, like purple coneflower or swamp milkweed that you can even find in common big box stores. Sometimes it's a straight native, sometimes it's a cultivar, usually a cultivar. So for landscapes, we tend to choose those that are very familiar looking, that have big blooms on them, long bloom periods, whereas prairies can host a variety of other plants that aren't going to be necessarily as aesthetically pleasing, but have different benefits they provide. You can't just let your lawn go because, as we said, it's already turf grass. So that just lets the turf grass grow. And any weed seeds that have blown into your yard, into your grass, that's going to give them the opportunity to germinate and grow. So they might be invasive species that are coming up. And even though they're blooming, they could still be invasive species. So like our Canada thistle, which is a highly invasive species, has a big purple bloom on it. And a lot of times people think that's a nice native plant, and it's not. Dame's Rocket has a big phlox-like bloom on it. Looks really pretty, but it's highly invasive. And what those invasive plants do is they push out any native plants without providing any ecosystem benefits to the surrounding habitat.
I believe that's one of the greatest value points of Wild Toledo is that you guys are offering a product that has high reward without heavy resource needs, basically. And that's why your program, I feel like, has just been so explosive, because for a lot of people who are just interested in the environment and care about wildlife, even remotely, as soon as they hear, oh, I can help my local pollinators or my local wildlife species by just simply having a few native plants in my yard that also look pretty, sure, why not? And you guys have become the experts in the resource to be able to find that and get that easily. Now, Elizabeth, you've been here for 3 years now, you said. Mm-hmm. And so since learning about the zoo's mission, how is it that you think that Wild Toledo has become a great fit for living out the zoo's mission?
I think it's a great fit because it starts from the ground up. So we put in native plants that some of them themselves are locally endangered or even federally listed plants that we can install into landscapes or into our prairies. But those are going to create direct benefits to our insects and pollinators within that ecosystem. And it just goes up the food web from there. So there are birds eating those insects. There are other carnivores or predators eating those birds. They're feeding it to their offspring. And it affects everything. And especially with native landscaping, you don't even have to change anything. Everyone has plants in their front yard. You have these foundation beds. So why not put a native plant in versus, a hosta or something that comes from another part of the world that's really not providing any benefits? But instead, you can start seeing more butterflies, birds, bees in your own yard and get the benefit from that. My favorite client so far that I've had, which many of my clients are amazing, but this client came to me. She wanted to do the right thing. She didn't know what that meant, and she wanted a low maintenance yard. And she lived, luckily for me, in Sylvania in the heart of oak opening. So she had these beautiful sandy soils, and she's like, nothing's going to grow here. And I was like, oh, I've got you. Like, no worries. I'll get a lot to grow here. And so we put in native landscaping in the foundation beds around her house, and we put a small prairie in her backyard as well because she was dedicated. So she didn't want to be watering. She didn't want to be weeding. She wanted someone to take care of it for her. She wanted to enjoy it. And she called me like a year after we installed and said, hey, I want to let you know I keep finding the neighborhood kids in my backyard. And I was like, what? She's like, oh, they're looking at all the monarchs back there.
Oh, that's adorable.
And so I've
Awesome.
invited them in and they can come in and play anytime. And I put a little, one of those lending libraries in my front yard with books about monarchs so the kids can learn even if I'm not home. Because she was a retired
wholesome.
teacher.
It's so cute.
Yeah, one of my absolute favorite success stories, this person who she just wanted to not spend so much on her water bill to water her grass
Valid.
and then ended up becoming this community resource.
Aw, that's really cool.
Truly amazing. And we see stories like that a lot where we have clients who aren't crazy interested in what we're doing. They just want it to look nice.
Mhm.
And then we get, how many times do you get texts of pictures of beetles and people are like, what is this? What did I find? You know, all the time we get that people really become involved in their own landscape by seeing the life that's reproducing and living right there in their backyard
Oh,
in the
how
heart of
cool.
Toledo.
That's cool. And like, it might sound like it might be a silly question, but what makes native plants so hardy in this region? Because for me, I don't have a yard, but if I did, I would love to be planting, like have a beautiful garden. And you said like, you don't need to have hostas or like roses for your place to look beautiful. You can have these native plants, but why are these native plants thriving in these extreme conditions, such as these heat waves that we're having right now that are really not fun versus like our really cold Ohio winters? What makes them like thrive?
So these plants have evolved here. So they've been here longer than, we've been here. So they have evolved with the predation that is here and existing and evolved with the climate. So we find a lot of our, sandy soils over in the oak openings region. Those plants have evolved there. They are there because of the sandy soils. You take those sandy, might think that like a plant that's in a sandy soil, dry soil, like, oh, if I give it more water and give it like a heavier soil, it's going to do better. It's not. It wants to live in that like sandy soil that the oak openings region still exists because farmers couldn't cultivate it as agriculture. And so that's why it's still here. And because those plants love that sandy, low nutrient, low moisture soils. But even in our more swampy areas, like where the remnants of the Great Black Swamp or along the Maumee River, we have a lot of clay soils. There are plants that are growing specifically in that area because it provides them all the nutrients and benefits they need. These plants are able to protect themselves from some of the predation. Unfortunately, we have crazy high populations of deer and rabbit right now, so that can be an issue. But they have evolved to be with the animals that are here and they coexist, creating some really beneficial, actually, relationships. For example, celandine poppy, it needs the locally native ants to spread its seed in order to reproduce. But because those plants are here, they don't care about the winter. They have crazy deep roots for these summer heat waves, up to like 20 feet deep, some of our prairie plants. So yeah, your top couple of feet of soil might be dry, but they're doing fine down there.
I wish I could go down there where it's cold.
Same.
That's the thing about Ohio. Ohio, it's like we get some of the coldest winters that there could possibly be. And at the same time, we have the most blistering hot, muggy summers ever.
Yeah.
The way that I think about it is that, as far as our type of settlement in culture and civilization in turf grass, it's only been here for like the last few hundred years with European settlement. But when we talk about native plants, we're talking about thousands and thousands of years of evolution and adaptation that's perfect for this climate, correct?
Yes.
Absolutely. So from a plant's perspective, of course, they do not appreciate being eaten by an animal. And so many plants will produce toxins in order to discourage them from being browsed upon by wildlife. And these toxins can actually, make the animals sick or even kill them in some cases because they're so strong. And so for wildlife to be able to utilize most plants, they do have to adapt in, varying degrees to tolerate these compounds that are produced by the plants. And it takes, millennia for these relationships and these adaptations to be forged that allow the animals to utilize the plants. A great example of that is with the monarch butterfly, which is, popularly known to only eat milkweed. And milkweed's actually a fairly toxic plant to most species. They avoid eating it. It's not one that's commonly consumed by deer or rabbits or most insects for that matter. Although a handful, actually quite a wide variety, have specialized to eat it. But that takes incredibly long time periods to, have those physiological changes in their body to be able to consume, nothing but milkweed, and not be affected by its toxins. And so when you pick up a plant like turfgrass from, a different continent, you bring it over to the US here and put it, out on the landscape, our local wildlife has had hardly any time to learn and adapt, to be able to utilize that species. And so they're kind of, like a deer in the headlights. They have no idea what to do. And in most cases, they avoid, interacting with the plant. They're certainly not able to benefit from it in most ways. Whereas our native plants that, have been along just as long or longer than our native wildlife, they have those relationships forged over many, many years, and they're able to more wholly utilize the plants for food, shelter, pollination, seed dispersal, etc. It's unfortunate that turfgrass is kind of culturally the default for many areas.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly has its place in a park, or say in your yard if you have a dog or kids, and you want an open space for them to be able to play. I think when it's intentional, it's fine. However, it's just kind of unfortunate that most people, they build a house on the lot and then every other, square inch of that parcel is turf. Whether or not they're actually utilizing it with the dog or the kids. In many cases, the only, use, quote unquote, that turf sees is the homeowner mowing it once a week.
Yeah. You're right, though. It's become the default
Yeah.
in our culture. And it's interesting that that's really a thing if you think about it. And from my perspective, Wild Toledo, part of your guys' purpose, or an indirect purpose, is to kind of give people that awakening as to, like, it doesn't have to be turf grass. Like, you can plant something that's been here for millennia and they'll thrive in it.
You just need to, like you said, have the intention to do it. And I kind of want to start, like, you guys do so many different, like, sizes of these native landscapes. So, like, with you, Elizabeth, you are doing something from, like, somebody's rose garden in their front yard, which could be a small plot, up to these larger prairies that we're seeing at, like, abandoned parking lots or, like, schools. So I want to start small with you, Elizabeth. What does that process kind of look like for you when somebody calls? Like, let's say I call you up. I'm like, hey, I just bought a house and I want to have some native landscape, but I only have, like, this small patch. What can I do?
Yeah, the beautiful thing about working with native plants and the variety of native plants that we have in the nursery, because we have about 500 different species in our nursery, is that I can do from anything from a small landscape to a large, very large landscape. So the smallest landscape I've probably done since working at Wild Toledo has probably been only like 5 by 10 or something like that, something really small, up to our largest installation last year, which was an acre in size. Oh, wow. So it goes everywhere in between. But because we have such a diverse set of species available to me, I have my choice of what I want to do, and I can do a unique design for each landscape. So we oftentimes get people asking, like, can you give me a price per square footage? And I'm like, nope, because it's all so unique. It's all completely unique. So each landscape starts with a site visit with the client, discussing what they're interested in, what they're looking for. Oftentimes we have people who just want something crazy low maintenance, like shrubs. And I can put that in a couple species of shrubs to give you color and interest throughout the year, still provide a lot of habitat and a lot of benefits to our local ecosystem. Have other clients who have unique demands. Like I just did an all grasses landscape, which was pretty cool. A lot of texture, a lot of interest, very minimalistic, kind of very modern landscape design. And then I have other people who want all flowers all the time. It's probably the most common, is the more flowers, the more color, the better. But we're able to accomplish that because of the diversity of the 500 species we have in stock. So each site visit starts talking with the client, what they're interested in, and then I create the design for them. So that involves me actually drawing up an image using Google SketchUp of what their landscape's gonna look like, the outline, overlaying that onto the property image that I have, like a bird's eye view, and then zooming in and putting in the swaths of color. Each species is listed in there, how many plants they're gonna get, information about the species, what our timeline is for installation. Because of all of our plants are grown in-house. We're not just purchasing from Home Depot or whatever. We are growing them in-house. It's So we have to give the nursery plenty of time to get those plants grown and up to size. And then my crew goes back out, installs all those landscapes as well, and we can even maintain them for the following year. So we maintain them as an annual contract, just like any other landscaper, honestly, is what I am, except I tell people all the time, I'm any other landscaper, except I only use native plants and I happen to work at a zoo.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. We were kind of wondering like how you guys differ from any other.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just a zoo staff shirt.
But you guys are unique in the product that you're offering.
Absolutely.
And I am like, I'm not a customer of your guys's yet, but
Come on,
Corey. What are
I
you
know.
doing?
What am I doing?
And you live and you have a house. I don't have
I'm
a
glad
house,
we're
so I
talking
have an
about this
excuse.
because I just have like a solid dry patch in my front yard and it's just like straight up clay.
All right, send
and
me an email.
Nothing will grow in clay. But I imagine natives
Oh, really?
will thrive in
I
clay.
kind of live in clay.
I know. I'm getting in trouble here. I'll have to hit you up after this.
Okay.
Get a
What was I
business
getting
card.
to there? Yeah.
Before you put your foot in your mouth.
I definitely did that. Yeah.
It's all right. Well, you talk about like the smaller stuff and what people can do at their own homes.
I remember what I was thinking.
Go for it then. Go for it. I'll let you talk.
So those site visits and the consultations, you do that free of charge.
Absolutely. So the first site visit consultation is free of charge. We can discuss options. Typically what I do is then provide a design contract to the client. If they're interested in proceeding, they can pay for the design fee and I give them a ballpark range of what I estimate the installation would cost. We do offer 3 different packages with the native landscaping. The most common is the Wild Toledo installation package. So that's where I do all the design work. I quote out everything. The nursery grows all the plants in-house, and then my crew installs it. And like I said, can maintain it for future years.
Do it all.
That's the one that you need.
100% do it all.
See, listen. As a
Listening.
young homeowner, I'm scared of everyone.
Young.
I'm scared of everyone and everything. Because everything is a trap. Everything.
That is
Nothing
true.
is free. So for a
100%
person like
free,
myself,
yeah.
and I imagine others, to hear that the site visit, the consultation, talking to you guys is free of charge. Like,
Completely
you guys,
free, yeah.
Like you guys are so mission driven and like you just want to make sure that people are comfortable moving forward with your services, which
Absolutely.
I find to be awesome.
Absolutely. So, like I said, every part of our packages starts with a free site visit. Our second package is our more budget-friendly design and plant package, where again, I do all the design work. The nursery grows everything in-house, and then we deliver the plants to you with copies of your design, and it's up to you to do the preparation and installation. A little more budget-friendly, a little more hands-on. Some people enjoy that, kind of getting to do the planting themselves, but they get stumped by the design portion of it. Not sure how to pick the right plant for the right place, which is half the battle. Finally, we offer design only. So if you're interested in just having us do the design, just picking the species, we can do that for you. But then you are responsible for your site prep, installation, and sourcing your plants. This has been something that we've used for trying to expand a little further away than from Toledo and still doing the design work out that way.
Your
Great.
guys' reach has gone so far. And like I said, from like the smaller homes to what you're doing more of, which is like the larger project prairie that's going far into Michigan. And I don't know, what's the furthest place that you've planted?
So the furthest prairie installation that we have is down in Tennessee, actually. But as you mentioned, we're up in Michigan, Central Ohio, of course, Northwest Ohio, Indiana, and
It's growing.
Yeah, the species of plants that we're offering, how wide of a region are suitably fit for? You know,
Yeah.
do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
if a plant
Wow.
if a plant that's grown here in Toledo, did it work down in Tennessee or is it different?
yeah, no, that's a great.
Yeah, annoyingly, that depends on the species.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So each of our species has its own native range. Like we said, especially with the oak openings region here, there are some that are very local. And then there are some that might be, the eastern half of the United States that they're native to.
Okay.
So it fully depends per species.
I'm saying that because, we're on an online platform. Anybody in the country can be listening to us. So you might be living in a different state that's like far south of us or far east of us, but you'd be surprised. Like if you're interested, reach out. These might be some,
Hit us up.
hit us up. These plants might be fitting for your region. So
Absolutely.
So with these larger prairies within Project Prairie, Jake, can you tell us a little bit about that project and what it is that you guys do?
Absolutely. So Project Prairie is, of course, with our prairie side of things, and specifically schools, where we go out and install typically a 1/4 acre or slightly larger prairie parcel on the school campus. And then our education staff here at the zoo. We'll also go out and assist the teachers with professional development, even get involved with the kids and kind of incorporate the prairie into various lesson plans at the school, whether that's in obvious ways like biology or science classes, but also in art or even like phys ed. We have all sorts of different subjects at the school being taught and utilizing the prairies in different ways, which is really interesting and nice to get the kids out there to kind of watch them as they grow, watch the work that they've done. In a lot of cases, we get the kids involved with assisting us in seeding or planting plugs out. And so it's really rewarding to get the kids involved, and they kind of get that satisfaction of, watching their own hard work pay off and bring in pollinators. Another really exciting project that's kind of component with Project Prairie is we do what's called a BioBlitz each year. And what a BioBlitz is essentially getting an army of people to go out to a location, in this case, our prairies, and we just identify as many different species as possible and record everything that we see. So whether that's a flower or a bird flying overhead, a butterfly zipping through, bee, you name it, we're taking pictures, we're identifying it and assembling a list. And it's really interesting and fun to watch. The various classes and different schools will get highly competitive with one another.
I found more bees than you.
Yeah, in the most productive and like wholesome way.
Right.
And they'll all be really amped up at we found 65 species this year, and we got a leg up on the other class or the other school, and
our prairie's better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are those the numbers that you're seeing from these installations?
Oh, honestly, that was probably even a low ball.
Really?
Yeah, on
number.
average, like if you were to throw out a number or a range, like how many species during BioBlitz are we seeing at any like average prairie installation?
Currently, we're at just over 400 species observed between all of our prairies. However, most of our prairies are going to be, in the hundreds at least. The plants that we sow from seed or plug in alone make up upwards of 100 species. We like to use a wide mixture of species so that the plants can kind of tell us where they prefer to be. Put a little bit of everything everywhere, and then where they're happiest is where the plants tend to stick. And so just from the plants alone, you can get into 100 plus species. And then often, the really interesting and fun part that varies more from school to school would be the wildlife that's able to move in and kind of capitalize on that native plant diversity. And so, hundreds of pollinators, mammals. Some schools will even put trail cameras out in the prairies so they're able to observe deer and raccoons and red fox, moseying through the prairie at night, even when they're out of session. And additionally, we do some biodiversity monitoring ourselves with various insect surveys, which the numbers just are through the roof. We're at this point at thousands of species that are observed between the various prairies. But it's really neat to watch the kids go out and they're collecting the data themselves, and 420 species or so observed just in our network of school prairies is really impressive feat.
Yeah, and that
That's
has
so
to be
cool.
so fun for the kids.
Yeah.
Kids love to get dirty. They love to go outside.
It's fun.
I've heard the teachers refer to them as just living classrooms, and that's quite honestly what they are.
Yeah.
So how do you have an idea of how many different schools in the area that we actually have installed these prairies at?
So currently we have, we're actually approaching 100 different prairies at schools. Yes.
That's
Just
so
at schools,
cool.
100 different prairies.
There's one in my backyard. There's a school in my backyard.
Yeah.
And one day I was like, I know that sign. And I walked over there and I was like, no way. You guys are back there.
That is true. Like I'll drive around, like I live in Maumee, for instance, and I drive around and I look at all the different schools and like, yep, there's our sign, there's our sign, there's a sign. And
It's cool to see.
yeah, we're just popping up everywhere. Just
And-
like these plants.
Talking about the different species that you guys are, wildlife that you're finding out there. I think it was 2 summers ago, you sent us a photo of this giant snake that you found in the one on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
How often are you, first of all, what kind of snake was that? Because I like snakes. And second of all, like, what's the craziest thing that you found in a prairie?
Oh, great question. That snake honestly might be one of my favorite finds.
Yeah.
So that was the eastern fox snake, which is actually a pretty uncommon species. They're kind of restricted around the Great Lakes, and right here around the zoo and along the Maumee River is a hot spot for them. And so they actually do turn up in a handful of our prairies around the zoo and other kind of local South Toledo prairies, which is really exciting every time we see them. So yeah, that was one of my favorite local snake species, the eastern fox snake, which is definitely up, towards the top of my list. Another one would be the endangered rusty patch bumblebee that our education curator observed in a native planting on zoo grounds several years back. And that's actually the last known occurrence of that species in the state of Ohio, I believe.
Wow.
It's cute.
Yeah, they're really
Fluffy.
Yeah, fluffy and got some interesting colors going on. It's got
like a
cool
rusty butt.
species. Yeah.
It does have a little rusty butt. I like them.
So not only are you guys planting acres and acres and acres of wild prairies, you're also burning them down to the ground. What's up with that?
So it definitely can seem a little bit counterintuitive at first, but most of especially our local prairie species, are fire adapted. So they're actually accustomed to natural wildfires or wildfires that were used as a form of land management from Native Americans throughout history. And so most of our local prairie species are well adapted to being burned every 3 to 5 years, typically, was the historic frequency of these burns. And so the above ground growth can get completely fried by these burns. However, those expansive root systems that many of our native species have, our prairie species in particular, tend to be extremely deeply rooted in many cases. And that underground root growth is completely unaffected. And they're able to actually kind of be reinvigorated by the nutrients that are released from that burning material. The burns actually are incredibly useful for combating invasive species too. Many of our invasive plants that will pop up from time to time in the prairies have shallower root systems, and in many cases are annual species that start growing earlier in the year than most of our native species do. And so if we run a prescribed fire through a prairie in, say, April, before most of the native material is even growing for the year, that fire can singe and kill many of the non-native invasive species before the native ones have even sprouted for the year. And the native ones just pop up, closer to May for the most part, and, go about their business unaffected entirely. And without that added competition from the invasive species too.
Okay.
So it is useful.
Yeah, it's incredibly useful, and it has a purpose. I thought you guys were just doing it because it looks pretty cool.
Well, it looks cool.
Yeah, the first time that I witnessed one of those, I didn't realize how hot. Like, it's fire, of course, it's going to be hot, but then everything is dry and it just like catches a blaze, but it's very controlled, which is nice. But like, I got real close to my eyebrows. I don't have much to begin with, but I felt them starting to singe off a little bit.
Yeah, some of our prairies with a higher fuel load, many of the native grasses result in quite a hot burn. For those concerned about the wildlife utilizing these prairies, which is often a question that's asked, the contractor that we work with to conduct these burns, they intentionally will take these burns really slow. So rather than starting, the end of the prairie that is upwind on fire first, and then letting the wind just rip the fire through the prairie quickly, we tend to start always on the downwind side so that it's just like a thin, slow creeping wall of fire. That's often quite patchy too. So we rarely would ever burn every inch of a prairie. Often it's high spots will get burned a little bit more frequently, a little bit more thoroughly. But those lower, spots or spots that are maybe a bit greener, we let go unburned. And so the burn, is kind of patchy, and it still provides little areas of refuge for wildlife. And they're also able to, in most cases, just outpace that slowly creeping.
I remember seeing
we've witnessed that.
Rabbits were just hopping to a safe spot that wasn't being burned, or like, for instance, you guys would find like little snakes in there, and I would just be on the edge, like, give me the snakes, and then I'd take it over to a safe patch.
Yep. Yeah. And these burns that we're conducting, here in our prairies are nothing like the burns that are more widely broadcasted on TV, like the uncontrolled, and incredibly damaging and intense wildfires out west. So this is totally different situation.
Yeah, like you said, we're working with contracted professionals. Like literally, you need a license to burn.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
My pyromaniac brother can't just like go out there and be like, fire!
No, these are people that know exactly what they're doing. They're licensed to do so. And it's really cool seeing them work because they come out in a whole team. They got all the fire gear on and they're constantly communicating with each other. So it's been cool to witness those burns over these last few years.
Definitely.
Yeah, the public outreach too has been amazing. A lot of conservation organizations will utilize prescribed burning for the benefits that we discussed earlier, but few organizations are as urban and like publicly visible. And so I always get a kick out of burning some of our tiny prairies adjacent to neighborhoods or businesses, and it provides a great kind of reason to engage with the public as they're wandering by.
Show.
Yeah.
I remember one of the schools in Perrysburg, you guys had done a burn for it, and they actually made a whole event around it. They invited all the kids and all their parents to come out, and like they gave them like rooftop access to the school, and they would just watch it as you guys are burning through the prairie. It was a great educational experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is just to clarify, if you do a small installation at your home, a prairie burn isn't something that you have to do. So if you plant
I'm not burning any landscape.
We're not coming in to burn down your landscape.
Elizabeth's not going to burn your house down on accident.
No,
Yeah, but if you're interested, it might be something that is possible. It would take some further coordination, but you guys typically will do like your larger installations and do those burns, right?
Yep. So as you said, the burns aren't required. There are ways to mechanically kind of achieve the same results. So we could go in, for example, in the late spring and, just with pruning shears and remove some of that previous year's growth. Hand weeding is able to kind of combat those invasive species that the burns are so effective at combating out in a more naturalized setting. So it's certainly not a requirement, but it is kind of the least labor intensive way of managing, especially those larger installations.
And again, just to kind of recap, it really provides a lot of great nutrients for these plants, and it kills off invasive plants that have more shallow root systems, right? That's like the main two things that it does.
Nice.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Nice.
You learned
Nice.
something. Good job, Corey. Yeah.
Fire.
Fire. So you guys are working with heat, but you're also working in the cold. I went with you this past winter on a freezing day. I had my snow pants on. We had just gotten like 2 or 3 inches of snow, and you're like, "Hey, we're gonna go seed this prairie up in Michigan." I said,
Sorry, what?
Excuse me? I said, have you checked outside yet? But you're like, "No, come on, I'll show you." So educate us. Why is working in the winter important for you guys?
Sure. So a lot of our native plants need that period of cold, moist stratification to actually break down their seed coats in order to germinate. So that's just another way they have adapted to our environment. So most of our plants are going to produce seed in the summer and the fall, and it'll sit dormant in the soil until it receives that cold winter treatment in order to germinate. So the best time of year to seed our prairies is actually right in the middle of winter. Doesn't matter really how cold it is. If there's snow, there's been evidence that, you can seed on top of the snow and that seed's going to melt through and hit that soil layer as long as the area is prepped correctly. And the seeds will sit there and wait till spring until they have the right conditions to germinate. We actually do that artificially for our nursery. We have a big walk-in freezer or refrigerator that we will recreate those winter conditions in order to get plants to germinate.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Wow, that is really cool.
So you're really working all year round.
Yeah, we never stop.
Which seems very common within the zoo world. We're never stop working.
Yeah, it just kind of seems like your guys' organization just shifts into different roles throughout the years, just like how the plants do. They have different stages of their growth, and for you guys, you just follow those different stages of growth, right?
They're just little flowers.
Just little flowers.
Yeah, it's a very seasonal job, which is one of the things I like about it, because as soon as I get tired of one thing, it's done. We're moving on to the next thing, and it's kind of reinvigorating every time.
I think it's time to get into our Zoomies.
Yeah.
So
how do we cue this one up? Because I don't know if plants get Zoomies.
Can plants get Zoomies? Well, actually, funny story. My mom, God love her, Melinda.
Where is this going?
Shout out to just listen, Melinda.
Okay,
shout out to Melinda. She's a longtime watcher. She sends me videos of her happy leaf. Okay, and it's this leaf that's outside our kitchen window, and it just pink, pink, pink. So is that a plant getting Zoomies?
Is that wind?
Yes, but I'm just trying to cue up. I think plants can get Zoomies because he's happy and I'm going to insert a video. He just waves back and forth. And she actually picked the leaf in the winter or at the end of the summer and she pressed it and she framed it. It's the small things of life that make her happy. But do plants get Zoomies like my mother's happy leaf?
I have not experienced a plant Zoomie yet. Have you?
I'm trying to think outside the box here to get
We're gonna have to pot up like a native tree and throw it on a skateboard. Have it grind the half pipe.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the species that live near the plants that are getting the Zoomies. Like, have you ever seen a bumblebee just like pollen go crazy?
Oh yeah, they get like drunk on it. Like you can get, especially my favorite to watch is like the foxgloves where they have this really long tubular flowers and the bumblebees crawl in there and there's just a little fuzzy bee butts sticking out. But like they don't care really how close you are. You can really observe them because they are in the zone, just going around through it, and just they have to hit every flower and get in between the patch. So.
I do love watching bees in like super slow motion because when they're flying around, zipping around, they look like they're all precise and stuff. But when you watch them back in super slow motion, they are some clumsy insects.
They all that pollen on them.
They are just, I don't even know,
life.
Bouncing around through life.
Yeah. So yes, everything gets a little Zoomies sometime. All right. So my Zoomies questions. First one's a little silly. Which plant would win in a fight? Poison ivy or stinging nettle?
Are they fighting each other or fighting me?
Both.
Which one would make you suffer more? And maybe if they fought each other, who would win?
If they fought each other, who would win in the battle?
I think the stinging nettle is going to win if they fought each other because it can sting. Poison ivy is not going to affect other plants with their urushiol. Like it's going to affect us, the chemical within it that creates the rash. However, it's going to affect me a lot, and I usually needle some steroid injections to get through that.
Oh, no. Yeah, I'm highly allergic to poison ivy. Mm-hmm. It sucks big time.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a big thing we want to know. On average, do you have any clue how many seeds you're planting each year with Wild Toledo? Because you guys walk out to these prairies to throw seed out, and you just have like 5-gallon buckets of just seeds.
Pounds and
pounds. Or
like how many individual seeds are in there?
Depends on the species. Because some are going to be pretty big, and then some are like a grain of dust. So, I mean, by the ounce. You have
heavy machinery that you dump all these into and to do like larger installations, right?
Right. I would say for the nursery alone, which I could probably take a bit more of a honed in guess at, we would be at certainly in the hundreds of thousands of seeds just for producing the potted plants. And that is considerably less seed required than, for sowing acres and acres of prairies. So I don't think I'm too off base in saying it. It's probably millions of individual seeds that are, sown each year.
My final Zoomies question, I'm going to expose y'all a little bit. How do you cover a greenhouse in windy conditions?
You don't.
A little backstory.
How do you know that one for a fact? How do you know that's not possible?
A little backstory, just a funny story. I love working with different departments around the zoo. I get to just see their different personalities, and their Wild Toledo personalities really came out when this past, was it fall or early winter? We were down in Bowling Green, Ohio, and you guys were covering a huge greenhouse. And you're like, oh yeah, Caitlin, it's going to be so easy. There's like 5 of us and we're just going to like lay out the cover and then we're going to toss these tennis balls over with rope and then we're just going to pull it up and like you're going to get photos and videos. It's going to be great.
Easy peasy.
I'm sitting there and they're struggling for a little bit and they're pulling and I have video. I do not stop recording. That's my job. Okay. I'm going to giggle, but I'm going to record. So I'm sitting there and they're struggling. And then I see Kelsey, that's her name, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kelsey, she's small. Kelsey went airborne at one point with this wind. And I said, that's when I need to step in. So I kept recording, set up the tripod. And I remember like going and getting my car and I 4-wheeled it. And I was like, tie the rope to my car. That didn't work. What was it like for you guys? What happened?
Yeah, Jake, what happened?
Yeah, so we were fairly confident going into that because we had already covered the first greenhouse of the 2. And, BG's forecast is only so reliable.
It's literally called blowing green.
Yeah.
That's what I live
That's
there.
the first for me.
It's
I haven't heard
blowing
that blowing green.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we were monitoring the forecast, especially the wind speed, pretty closely.
Not close enough.
Yeah, not close enough. Things look fairly promising to start, and we thought we could, pull that off before the winds picked up in the afternoon. And as you got to see firsthand, we got a little caught off guard. So yeah, it was never a dull moment.
It was hilarious because I'm just cracking up the entire time. And I call Corey afterwards and I was like, hey, I'm going to be a little later than expected. I have to go change my clothes because I jumped in, started helping you guys. I'm laying on this tarp.
I was saying, I'm sorry, you're helping with what?
Yeah. And then I showed you the video and you're like, oh my, and it's right off 75. So I'm sure people driving were like,
are those people hanging out of that?
I remember coming around the corner and seeing you in, and I was like, oh, it's that bad.
Caitlin's in it. Crap.
Yeah. Actually, though, a lot of people don't even realize that we have some stuff down in BG. So that's a recent expansion that we did, right? Mm-hmm. So what's going on in BG?
So here at the zoo, where our original nursery was built and still exists, we're tight on space. The zoo's been expanding in every way over the years, and we just don't have that much open land to, build more greenhouses or grow trees and shrubs out in the field. And so we partnered with Bowling Green State University. Heck yeah.
Sorry. That too.
You can't resist.
It's in my blood.
And so we expanded down onto a 14-acre parcel of land owned by the university that they're leasing to us to build over the years as need dictates up to 8 gigantic greenhouses that you saw the first 2, which are already built. And then we have tons of open field space for growing out larger trees and shrubs up to size, which will be amazing. So we're also hoping to get, and already have began involving the faculty, staff, students. It's been great getting botany classes to come tour the greenhouse. And, we've benefited greatly from a lot of their hard work and dedication, volunteering and helping us plant, and up-pot plants and sow seed and whatnot. So it's been a great start to, what we're sure is going to be a really beneficial relationship there.
Yeah. What a great partnership. I mean, BG's been great to work with, and just being able to be in that space and just so close to those students, it's got to be a mutually beneficial thing that you guys got going on already. So we're looking forward to seeing what the future of that project is.
All right. That's all our Zoomie questions, but now we have some questions from our viewers.
Yeah.
Vivian wants to know, how can we help? So how can other people, Toledoans or non-Toledoans, help with you guys, whether that's volunteering or doing their own things?
Or just the overall purpose of the program.
Yeah, if you're interested in having some native landscaping or native prairie at your house, check out our website and you can connect with us directly through there. We do also have a regular group of volunteers who help in the nursery doing some plant care, and it's a great community to meet some other fellow native plant enthusiasts and work directly with the Wild Toledo staff and watch us keep all our chaos going on every day.
What they can also do, so you guys are an entirely separate organization from Toledo Zoo. So yes, you can find Wild Toledo on the Toledo Zoo's website, but they actually have their own website. So you can go to wildtoledo.org. You guys also have your own Facebook page as well.
Facebook and Instagram, yep.
Yep. So you guys are constantly posting new interesting things about plants and notices about plant sales and whatnot. So be sure to check that out as well.
And I guess to add on kind of what people can do to help. A lot of times people have it in their head, I need a lot of space to dedicate towards a native planting to help wildlife. And certainly the more space, the better. But some of my favorite stories are, people living downtown Toledo in a high-rise apartment, and all they have is a tiny apartment balcony and just a single pot with a swamp milkweed plant growing in it can attract and raise, monarch caterpillars even that first year. So I would just, kind of offer out to any of our listeners who think they might, not yet be in a position with enough space to dedicate to really make a difference, that Even just a single plant can make such a positive impact on our ecosystem and, support our local wildlife. So don't be afraid to start small, even, a single plant tucked in the back corner of a garden or out on the balcony. Every little plant can help.
So you were proving my thoughts wrong, because I'm apartment living and I was like, oh, I just don't have the space to do anything yet. I don't own the land, but I could get a little potted plant.
Mm-hmm.
You sure
Absolutely.
can.
Awesome. I'm going to. All right. Our next question is from Nick. Nick wants to know, what is the biggest issue for Ohio wildlife today in terms of plants?
I would say that habitat loss is probably the largest issue that we're facing. We joked earlier about Ohio being a lot of flat land that's been, of course, mostly turned into agricultural areas. And so that does, wipe out and remove a lot of habitat that would have been available to our local wildlife. And so, really the biggest issue I'd say is, and the solution to that issue is trying to restore these natural areas, again, at any scale possible. And when, we rebuild ecosystems from the ground up, we spend most of our time and energy on the plants and restoring them. A lot of times the animals will kind of fall into place. And so by working with the native plants, you can kind of have that trickle up effect.
Another issue that comes to mind for me too is we have a lot of like runoff water. And you guys had mentioned earlier that these native plants, most of them have deep rooted systems that actually help to mitigate nutrient runoff that goes into our lake systems. Could you speak on that a little bit too? So
the roots are certainly absorbing a lot of those excess nutrients, especially when planted in what's called a buffer strip, where you can plant a prairie, for example, in a strip along a stream or a ditch that acts to kind of slow down the water that maybe, for example, is running off a parking lot or out of an agricultural field. And it can have some excessive nutrients that if they get into the waterways, they can contribute to those algal blooms out in Lake Erie that we unfortunately, know so much about here in Toledo. And so these buffer strips, the native plants can, first and foremost, just slow down the water. So water is going to move more slowly over all of the plant stems and leaves than it would over, just bare ground or a parking lot. And as it slows down on the surface, that gives it more time to soak into the ground. And all of the expansive root systems of the plants are good at aerating the soil and making it a bit more porous for that water to actually infiltrate into the ground rather than just skip across the surface. And then once it is in the ground, those roots that you mentioned are great at locking up those nutrients so that they never even make it to the waterway.
Very cool.
Yeah. Our last question is from Ruby. Ruby wants to know, what is your favorite native plant?
I get asked this all the time and I don't have an answer. It's honestly it changes constantly. And Jake can attest to that. Seeing my designs, I get really set on here's my favorite plant of the week. And I use it continuously. And then I move on to something else. But for me, I spend a lot of time outdoors, spend a lot of time hiking. So what's in bloom is my favorite because it is so gorgeous right in that moment. It's having its little moment to shine. And as soon as that plant starts to fade, another plant comes in. So the beauty of landscaping with natives that are all perennials is that you can have color and interest throughout the year. So even in the winter, we can find interest and beauty in seed heads, in standing grasses, in bark on trees and shrubs, and our wildlife continues to use them. So leave your garden standing, you'll get the birds coming in, eating on the seeds. You'll see the effects of them picking up leaves for nesting later in the spring. And there's just interest throughout the year with using those perennial plants as they bloom. From native plants can start blooming in April and bloom through November. It's a long time.
Oh, any that stand out to you, Jake?
I do tend to agree, but I'll be as bold as I can and try and offer at least
declare a favorite.
One of my favorites, and that would have to be the white oak tree. They're just so impressive, just visually, but also they're what we call a keystone species. They support a disproportionately large number of other wildlife in the ecosystem. So Oak trees, for example, can support a couple hundred caterpillar species of our native moths and butterflies. And of course, those caterpillars, many of them end up, serving as a food source for nesting birds. And it really supports the entire food chain. Of course, you got the acorns that many mammals are utilizing heavily. And just the tree itself, the giant canopy, huge structure. A lot of times we'll see owls, nesting in them, woodpeckers on dead snags. It's almost like a little city of its own, just a single tree. It's amazing how many hundreds of species can be supported by it. So I'm a little partial to the white oak tree.
I was not expecting to hear tree.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool though. I mean, that's a really good point. And you just looked up some pictures of them. Those trees look absolutely gorgeous. So
that's a nice looking tree.
That's a very nice looking tree.
I like that tree. There. All right. Those are all the questions that we have with our Zoomies and our visitors. Now we would like to just say thank you so much for being willing to be on this podcast and talking to us about what it is that you guys do here at the Toledo Zoo and within Wild Toledo.
Yeah. And I feel like, we've been talking for over an hour now, but I feel like we could just sit here and talk for even more time because there's just so much work that you guys are doing and we see that work and it's incredible. And we just want everybody else to know about it and be able to engage with what you're offering to this region, which is native plants and native habitats. So thank you again so much for being on this podcast with us today.
No, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And to say thank you, I'm not sure if you guys have seen our previous episodes. We make posters for every guest. We have some on our walls, but we have made some for you as well, of course. So Jake, for you, you were the knight of the native table, and you got some monarch butterflies near you and some native plants.
Yep. And Elizabeth, you are the milkweed matriarch.
I was hoping you'd say that milkweed was your favorite because I was like, yes, I nailed it.
But the butterflies do love milkweed.
Yes, and so we'd love to get your signatures for these so we can add it to our Hall of Fame, Wall of Fame. There's a little marker underneath the iPad right there. We would like to thank everybody for listening and watching this episode of the podcast. We hope that you learned something. I think I did. I enjoyed hearing the Wild Toledo antics. And now I know that I need to go do my part. And even though I only have an apartment, I can still do something. So I encourage all of you guys to look into this as well. If you're interested, go to thewildtoledo.org, contact Elizabeth, and she can start creating some beautiful gardens for you guys. Some other things that I'd like to plug. We have our Christmas in July coming up, July 25th and 26th. Unwrap the holiday magic early by strolling through a dazzling section of lights on the zoo's south side and enjoy a tremendously festive fun. Another event we have going on is Music Under the Stars series. Join us for free, fantastic concerts beginning at 7:30 p.m. on different Sundays throughout the summer. So definitely check out our website for that. And then we also have our Twilight Evenings where you can experience the zoo during extended hours at Twilight Evenings. Half-price admission will be offered from 4 to 8 p.m. with the zoo closing at 9 p.m. So this is like a great opportunity because right now it's so hot during the day. And if you still want to come to the zoo and get out with your family, you can come during the evening where it cools down a little bit and just enjoy your time.
Yep. It's after work. For me, it's the fact that it's half off admission. That's crazy to me because quite honestly, I would prefer to visit in the evening. It looks gorgeous outside during those hours and the animals are still active. So definitely try it out. Couldn't hurt.
Yeah. And we also have so many different workshops and classes going on within our horticulture department and other happenings here at the Toledo Zoo. And last but not least, Zoo-to-Do tickets are still on sale. The biggest party of the year. Are you guys going?
Sure.
Sure. Have you been to Zoo-to-Do?
I have not.
Well, I haven't either. Well, this is the year.
This is the year.
This is the year. And you better get those tickets fast because the premium experience tickets sold out like the first week.
It was crazy
of the
how
sale.
fast those went.
Yeah. And every year it sells out like at least a month ahead of time. And then there's always a wait list. So if you guys are debating on going to Zoo-to-Do, be sure to grab those tickets. Don't wait because you don't want them to go away.
That's all I got.
All right. Well, again, thank you all so much for joining and listening to Our Herd, the Toledo Zoo's official podcast. We're posting new episodes every month, so you want to make sure that you don't miss those. We're on 3 different platforms. You can watch us on YouTube or you can listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.